In this video, I'm going to be talking about the differences between auditory hallucinations and intrusive thoughts. But more specifically, I'm going to be talking about the differences between internal auditory hallucinations and intrusive thoughts. And if you don't know what an internal auditory hallucination is, well, stick around and I'll explain everything. And if you are new here, my name is Kit, and I have something called schizoaffective disorder, which is a condition where someone experiences symptoms of schizophrenia, such as delusions and hallucinations, but also symptoms of a mood disorder, either major depression or, in my case, bipolar. And it's a schizophrenic side of the condition that is the whole reason I get to make videos like this one. So with that out of the way, let's get started. When it comes to auditory hallucinations, there are two different kinds. You can have external auditory hallucinations, where the sounds, the music, the voices, all of it's heard outside of your head like it's happening in the room with you. Kind of like if a door nearby slammed shut, or a person was sitting next to you having a conversation, or you were hearing music from a record player. All of it's external, hence the external part of the term. Internal hallucinations, on the other hand, do consist of the same content, voices, sounds, music, etc., but these things are heard in the inner space of your mind, in the same spot where you'd find, say, an internal monologue or your own thoughts. So it's identical to an external hallucination, except that it's happening inside of your head. And as you might be starting to figure out, that inner space is the same place that intrusive thoughts tend to appear, which, to put it plainly, complicates things. So what defines an intrusive thought? Well, to put it plainly, it's a thought or image that is unwanted and uninvited. It can be anything from something that makes you uneasy to something totally disturbing. A possible intrusive thought that someone might have is, say they're at work, they're talking to their boss is opposite gender to them, and this person is heterosexual. They might have the thought of they could kiss their boss. It's not something that they actually want to do, but the thought just inserted itself in their head and they had to deal with it. That is an intrusive thought. And while they are upsetting in the moment, they're often brushed away and forgotten about. Because for most people, intrusive thoughts come and go. And they don't cause too much distress except for the moment in which they happen. But now that I've explained what an internal auditory hallucination is and what an intrusive thought is, let's dive into some differences between the two. And a quick disclaimer, this is just how I tell the difference. So what works for me might not work for someone else. The first difference has to do with the content. For me, an intrusive thought has a sudden and horrifying nature that I don't agree with and would never think to say to another person. Oftentimes, shame is involved because I really don't want to be thinking the things that the intrusive thoughts are shoving on me. And my voices, my internal hallucinations, they just don't have content that's disturbing to that level. It's almost like the degree of how messed up it is that determines whether it's a voice or not. My voices can say things that can be terrifying, but they don't stoop as low as my intrusive thoughts do. So I tell the difference in that way. If it's abrupt and really bad, like really, really bad, then it's probably an intrusive thought. If it's just a fleeting comment that's mostly harmless and maybe a little bit insulting on occasion, then it's probably a voice. The second difference is the nature of psychosis, aka the umbrella term that covers hearing voices, is that it makes you question reality, and intrusive thoughts just don't have this effect. Now, I've been in treatment for years, and I know when a voice is a voice for the most part. But before I was on medication to treat it, I thought my voices were not voices. I thought they were just me thinking creatively, which is such a load of crap looking back on it, but that was my life. And this whole time, I knew that my intrusive thoughts weren't actually real, because I just kind of knew it. Meaning that I knew the intrusive thoughts were things that I didn't actually want to believe, think, or do. They weren't like the voices, which I definitely didn't have insight to at the time. And this next bit is kind of hard to explain because it's been so long since my psychosis has really made me confuse reality on such a big level. But psychosis messes with how I view the world directly. It makes me think that whatever's happening is real even though it's fake. To the point where I don't always realize it at first, and it takes a second. For me, when I'm hallucinating, I'm having a conversation. I'm talking back and forth with someone who isn't there, and sometimes I get so lost in it that I zone out from the real world, even if I know that I'm hallucinating at the time. It lingers and it takes over, and it takes me to a different place mentally. Intrusive thoughts, sudden and abrupt, don't pull me into that pocket of psychotic existence. So that's another way I tell the difference. If they don't make me drift away from what's real, then it's probably an intrusive thought. With intrusive thoughts, there isn't a dreamlike reality shift or break like what I normally get when I'm experiencing psychosis. It's just like, whoa, that was fleeting and awful, and I'm glad it's over now. So if it's not making me question reality even a little bit, then it's probably not psychosis and just an intrusive thought. The next one is a big one, and it's that you cannot have a conversation with an intrusive thought. I talk with my voices when they show up because there's a conversational aspect to all of them. And intrusive thoughts don't exactly have personalities the way my voices do either. I have actual relationships with my voices for the most part. I know what they sound like and how they talk. I know how they act, and sometimes I can predict how they're gonna react to something. They're like real people for the most part, and that's just what psychosis is for me. And intrusive thoughts just don't have that level of depth. They have basically nothing in this domain, actually. Intrusive thoughts might be super clear when they happen, to the point that I hear them like actual words in that inner headspace I mentioned earlier. But I can't question and talk back to them like what I do with a voice. Another thing is my intrusive thoughts don't go on and on the way the voices do. They're usually quick, a hit and run, so to speak. If it lingers and I hear more of it, like a few sentences worth or even a paragraph, then it's more likely to be a hallucination. I haven't exactly ever had that happen with an intrusive thought, so I don't worry about that as much. But I know that for me, intrusive thoughts appear like short segments or fragments of a sentence. They're quick, disturbing, and I can't talk back to them even if I tried. And frankly, I wouldn't want them to talk back anyway, because honestly, that'd be kind of terrifying. And the final thing I'll say on this is that my intrusive thoughts sound different than my internal auditory hallucinations. I do have an internal monologue, which does complicate things, as that also competes for that inner headspace. But as a result of being someone who thinks in words, when intrusive thoughts come through my brain, they come through in words, and those words sound like me. Intrusive thoughts just sound like my own inner voice saying awful things to me in my head. And my psychotic voices do not. My psychotic voices sound totally different. They're male, female, androgynous, and sometimes they sound really weird like someone's using a voice changer. You kind of get the idea that they're different. And I think this is important because when it comes to really anything that's happening in my head, if it sounds like me, it probably is me. And if it sounds different, well, then I'm about to have a literal conversation and I'm actively hallucinating. And those are the ways that I separate intrusive thoughts from internal auditory hallucinations. It can get kind of dicey, but there are differences. And honestly, any one of these four helps me separate the two. But it's important to have fallbacks to make sure I absolutely know the difference, and that's why there's more than one way I tell the difference. Because separating these two things is really important, especially when it comes to psychosis. So I hope this video helped, and if you have any more questions, do drop them in the comment section down below. Videos like this, ones that do get requested a lot, I do make. So speaking up and proposing ideas and stuff in the comment section is the best way to get my attention so that I make the content that you guys want to see. Other than that, thanks for joining me and making the uncomfortable comfortable. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.